She used to light up a room, her laugh, infectious, her energy, magnetic. But lately a shadow had fallen over her. Her laughter was gone, replaced by a polite smile that never reached her eyes. Her vibrancy dimmed to a quiet stillness. She was there, yet not fully present, lost in the labyrinth of her own thoughts. Her husband, oblivious or perhaps choosing to be, continued as if nothing had changed. They went through the motions of their life together, the silence between them growing louder with each passing day. He spoke, she nodded. He planned, she agreed. A chasm had formed, invisible yet impenetrable, fueled by unspoken words and unacknowledged emotions. Gone were the days of animated conversations, the passionate debates that stretched late into the night. The once vibrant tapestry of their connection had faded, leaving behind a canvas of muted hues, a testament to the quiet suffering of a woman slowly disappearing within her own life. The weight of unspoken words, of unaddressed needs, pressed down on her, stealing her voice and her spirit. Relationships are complex dances of connection and autonomy, of shared dreams and individual desires. Navigating this intricate terrain requires constant communication, a willingness to listen not just with our ears, but with our hearts. Yet often we fail to truly see the ones we love, lost in the busyness of life, the demands of work, the endless cycle of doing. Emotional neglect, insidious in its subtlety, thrives in these spaces. It's not the grand gestures of betrayal that wound the soul, but the slow drip of indifference, the unanswered calls for attention, the unacknowledged bids for connection. It's the feeling of being invisible, unheard, unimportant in the very relationship that should make you feel cherished and seen. The woman, once so full of life, found herself lost in the crowd of her own marriage. Surrounded by familiarity, she felt utterly alone. Her husband, though physically present, was emotionally absent, lost in his own world, blind to the quiet desperation in his wife's eyes. He spoke of his day, his accomplishments, his concerns, yet never paused to ask about hers. The silence, once a comfortable companion, had morphed into a suffocating presence, a constant reminder of her isolation. She yearned to bridge the chasm that separated them, to reach out and feel the warmth of his hand in hers, to hear him say her name and truly see her, the woman she had become, the woman she was slowly losing. One rainy afternoon, she found herself seeking refuge in a small bookstore, its shelves lined with the promise of untold stories. As she browsed, her fingers trailing along the spines, she overheard a conversation. A man, his voice kind and filled with gentle humor, was discussing a book with the shopkeeper. Intrigued, she found herself drawn to their conversation, the words washing over her like a balm to her weary soul. They spoke of art, of travel, of the search for meaning in the everyday moments of life. She listened, captivated, a spark igniting within her, a flicker of something long forgotten. Gathering her courage, she hesitantly joined the conversation, her voice a mere whisper at first. The man, sensing her hesitation, met her gaze with warmth and encouragement. As they spoke, she felt a shift within her, a loosening of the knots that had bound her spirit for so long. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, she felt seen, heard, valued for the thoughts and feelings she had kept hidden for far too long. The conversation flowed effortlessly, a shared love for books weaving a tapestry of connection between two strangers. As she spoke, she felt a lightness return to her step, a glimmer of hope igniting in her heart. We all crave connection, the feeling of belonging, of being understood. Yet, when hurt repeatedly, when our emotional needs go unmet, we begin to build walls around our hearts. We retreat into ourselves, seeking refuge from the pain of disappointment, the sting of rejection. The woman, once so open and trusting, had slowly retreated behind her own wall of silence. Each unanswered plea for attention, each unacknowledged bid for connection, had become a brick in that wall, a barrier to the intimacy she craved. She had learned to protect herself from further pain by silencing her own needs, by dimming her own light. This self-protection, though understandable, came at a cost. By withdrawing, she inadvertently pushed away the very connection she so desperately desired. Her silence, a shield to protect her heart, had become a prison, trapping her in a cage of her own making. Silence, in its many forms, can speak volumes. It can be a weapon used to punish and control. It can be a refuge, a space to process and heal. And sometimes it can be a cry for help, a desperate attempt to communicate a need so profound, so deeply rooted, that words fail to express its magnitude. The woman's silence was her way of communicating her pain, her sense of feeling unseen and unheard in her own marriage. It was a plea for her husband to notice her, to truly see her, to hear the unspoken words that echoed in the spaces between them. But her silence, like a whisper in the wind, went unnoticed, lost in the cacophony of daily life. Her husband, accustomed to her quiet acquiescence, failed to recognize the depth of her despair, the silent scream of her soul yearning for connection. Her withdrawal, her lack of enthusiasm, her polite smiles that never reached her eyes, were all signs, all attempts to communicate her unhappiness. Yet her husband, blinded by his own assumptions, deaf to the language of her silence, remained oblivious to her inner turmoil. Connection is the lifeblood of any relationship. It's the bridge that allows us to reach across the chasm of our differences and touch the soul of another. It's in the shared laughter, the heartfelt conversations, the simple acts of kindness that we truly feel seen, heard, and valued. The woman, starved for connection, found solace in the most unexpected of places. A chance encounter, a conversation about books, had awakened something within her, a reminder of the joy that comes from truly connecting with another human being. The man, with his genuine interest, his ability to listen with his heart as well as his ears, had unwittingly offered her a lifeline. In his presence, she felt a sense of belonging, a feeling of being understood that had eluded her for far too long. Their conversations, though casual and infrequent, filled her with a renewed sense of hope. They spoke of their dreams, their fears, their observations of the world around them. She felt seen, not just for who she was on the surface, but for the complex, multifaceted woman she had become. The journey back to ourselves, to our own joy and vitality, is often a long and arduous one. It requires courage to face our own pain, to acknowledge the ways in which we have silenced ourselves, and to begin the process of healing. The woman, inspired by the genuine connection she had found, began to find her voice again. She started small, expressing her opinions more freely, sharing her thoughts and feelings with her husband, even though it was met with indifference or annoyance. She rediscovered her passions, the hobbies she had abandoned, the dreams she had pushed aside. She made time for herself, for the things that brought her joy, even if it meant doing them alone. Slowly but surely, she began to reclaim the pieces of herself that had been lost. The more she connected with her own needs, the more she realized the depth of her unhappiness in her marriage. The silence that had once been a source of comfort had become unbearable, a constant reminder of the emotional distance between her and her husband. Love, like a garden, requires constant care and attention to thrive. It needs to be nurtured with kindness, compassion, and a willingness to understand and meet each other's needs. Neglect, even unintentional, can be just as damaging as overt acts of cruelty. The woman, having found her voice and a renewed sense of self, realized that she could no longer tolerate the emotional neglect that had become the norm in her marriage. She had tasted the sweetness of genuine connection, and she knew that she deserved nothing less. The path ahead was uncertain, but she faced it with a newfound strength, a clarity that came from finally honoring her own needs and desires. She would have to have difficult conversations, set boundaries, and perhaps even walk away from a relationship that no longer served her. But she carried with her the knowledge that she was worthy of love, of respect, of a relationship where her voice was heard, her needs were met, and her spirit was free to soar. And in that knowledge, she found the courage to create a life filled with joy, connection, and the deep satisfaction of knowing that she had finally chosen herself.